Hello everyone. Welcome to the InStyle Knitting Studio. Today, we will knit this ear flap hat with a fluffy rib. I knitted it for my daughter who is 7 years old. The head circumference is 51 centimeters. But, you can easily knit it for any size, as I will explain and show all my calculations. It is knitted in parts at first. Ears, visor and back of the head are done separately, and then we connect them into a circle. Next, we knit in the round. After that, we make a sudden decrease at the top. I will leave all the lessons you need for knitting this hat under the video. There will also be a timing, as well as a text masterclass. As usual, I will post it on my website. I will also leave a link under the video. By the way, after we knit this hat, we will do a neat edging like this. If you want, you can skip the edging. We just hide all the ends and that's it. And of course, we will make hollow cords. So friends, happy knitting to everyone. Let's get started. I will use half wool yarn in a creamy color. I will knit with all the threads. Since it is very approximately 100 grams, 100 meters in length, if we will be doing edging or knitting cords, I will use 4 threads. That means I will be using yarn that is almost 2 times thinner. I will knit the hat with size 4 needles on a short cable. We will also need size 4 double-pointed needles. Next, for the cords, we need double-pointed needles size 2.5. That is, approximately half a size smaller than the main needle size. So, I have 2.5. A hook size 2.5 and long cable needles size 2.5 will also be needed for the edging. If you are not going to edge the hat, then those long cable needles size 2.5 won't be necessary. And 3 pairs of needles are also needed. Approximately the same size as the main size of the needles. I have a size 4. I will knit the hat with a size 4. Therefore, I have 3 pairs of needles close in size to a 4. Or I will need some pins for temporarily transferring stitches. But it is probably more convenient to use needles on a short cable. That's all about the needles. I will also need a needle with a wide eye. I will use one like that, but I will also take a thinner regular needle. That one will also be needed. Next, markers may be necessary. Then, stitch holders too. For knitting, we will need a measuring tape, scissors, a row counter, and a notebook with a pen for calculations. Additionally, if you are knitting a hat for babies, you might want to attach a pom-pom. Therefore, accordingly, a pom-pom is needed. The approximate height of my hat is 19 centimeters. The width is about 20 centimeters. Before knitting, we need to take measurements. That is, use a measuring tape to measure the circumference of the head of the person for whom we will knit the hat. I knitted for my 7-year-old daughter. I have a head circumference of 51 centimeters. After that, we need to knit a sample with half broche stitch. Wash it, dry it, and calculate your knitting gauge. I explain how to calculate the knitting gauge in a separate lesson. There will be a link above and a link below the video. And by the way, I did not stretch the sample when measuring, because it can be stretched a little more or a little less. I intentionally did not stretch it so that later I could subtract the necessary percentage from the total head circumference and then make all the calculations. So I got the following data. In 1 centimeter, there are 1.42 stitches, and in 1 centimeter, there are 3.6 rows. After that, we will make the calculations. Since I did not stretch my sample when calculating the knitting density, I will subtract 25% from the head circumference. According to my calculations, it turns out that from the head circumference, you need to subtract approximately 25% to get this number. This will be the total width of the hat. We will knit not for 51 centimeters, not for such a circumference, but for this smaller one. Because the half patent ribbing stretches very well, you should also subtract about 25% from your head circumference. if you did not stretch your sample when calculating the knitting density either. So, subtract 25% and you will get this number. I ended up with 38 centimeters. By the way, for those who don't know how to subtract 25%, I've outlined it here in 3 steps. It comes out to 38 centimeters. I take this number and multiply it by my knitting density, by the number of stitches per centimeter, not the head circumference according to my measurements, but specifically 38 centimeters that I multiplied to get 54 stitches. This is the total number of stitches for the hat. That is, when we connect all our pieces, we will knit the visor separately, the ears separately, the nape part. Then we will connect all these details into a circle, and we should end up with 54 stitches. So, for our head circumference, we will need 54 stitches. I think that's clear. Now let's calculate everything separately for the ears. We will need to knit 2 pieces. What size should the ears be? My ear width. The width of this piece is 28% of the total width of the hat. From this number, if we take 28%, we get the width of one ear. Look, I take the total width of the hat, which I calculated here as 38, and multiply it by 28%. How to multiply by 28%? I also calculated here in parentheses. I ended up with a width of about 10.5 centimeters. I take 10.5 centimeters, the width of the ear of this piece, and multiply it by the knitting density, by the number of stitches in 1 centimeter. It results in 15 stitches. This number of stitches should be something like Bloomberg. This means that the ear part will have a width of about 10.5 centimeters. I will need to cast on 15 stitches. So, the width of the ear is 15 stitches. The height of the ear is approximately 12 centimeters. Yours might be a little more or a little less. But for a 7-year-old, I think 12 centimeters is a good height for this detail. 12 centimeters multiplied by the number of rows per centimeter, 3.6, gives me 43 rows. So, to knit the ear with a height of 12 centimeters, I need to knit 43 rows. This number of rows should also be odd. And one more thing, since my ear will be slightly rounded, I will subtract 4 stitches from the 15 stitches needed for the width of the ear. This means I will initially cast on not 15 stitches, but 11. Then, during the process of knitting the ear, we will add those 4 stitches and reach 15 stitches. As for the width of the ear, I think that is clear. Let's figure out the visor. Here it is almost the same similarly. Only I took 31% from the total width of the cap for the visor. The width of the cap is 38 centimeters. We calculated, and I multiply 38 centimeters by 31%. I also wrote in parentheses how to calculate this 31%. I found it to be 12 centimeters. So, the width of my visor is 12 centimeters. I take 12 and multiply it by the knitting density, by the number of stitches per centimeter, which results in 17 stitches. The number of stitches for the visor should be odd. So, my visor will have a width of 12 centimeters or 17 stitches. For the height, my visor is 10 centimeters. Again, you can calculate and take 11 or maybe 9. A bit more or less by a couple of centimeters. I think you'll orient yourself based on your cap. Since I don't know what size you are knitting for, I looked at the 7-year sizer and saw that 10 centimeters in height is just right, so I will multiply 10 centimeters by the number of rows per centimeter, 3.6, and get 36 rows. That is, in order to connect the visor with a height of 10 centimeters. I need to knit 36 rows. This number needs to be even. The ears should be odd, but here it should be even. The visor will also be slightly rounded. Therefore, I will initially cast on not 17 stitches, but -4 stitches. I will cast on 13 stitches initially. Then I will add those 4 stitches and will end up with 17 stitches for the width of my visor, just like in the ears and the nape. The nape part is very small. This means that the width, according to my calculations, is approximately 13% of the total width of the hat. I multiply 38 by 13%. I get 5 centimeters. Here, I explained it again. If someone does not know how to find 13% of the number of centimeters, the width of the nape is about 5 centimeters for me. This is for a 7-year-old. Well, for an adult, it would probably be a couple of centimeters more. But it is better, of course, to measure, even with a measuring tape. So I take 5 centimeters. I multiply by the knitting density, by the number of stitches per 1 centimeter. It comes out to 7 stitches. This amount should be odd. So, the nape width will be this nape part, 5 centimeters or 7 stitches. As for the height, it actually turns out to be 2 rows. For the nape, I will need this half a centimeter in height. 0.6 centimeters. I multiply by the number of rows in 1 centimeter, by the density, yes, and I get 2 rows. That is, I will knit 2 rows to make the nape part. And the number of rows should be even. So, I have 2 rows. I don't know, you can knit 4 if you want, but I will knit 2 rows. This is how my percentages are distributed. Perhaps yours will be a little different, but I show you how I knit. So I hope you will succeed too. After we have done all our calculations, we start knitting. First, we will knit the ear. On the needle, we cast on 11 stitches. Using the usual universal method, we cast on loosely. We do not pull tightly. We turn the knitting. This is our first row. It will be a purl row. We will knit purl rows without any increases. The increases will be in the knit rows, so, the first row. We slip the edge stitch as a knit. Next we will knit in ribbing 1 by 1. We start with a purl stitch. I knit with classic stitches. Purl knit, we continue until the end of the row. At the end, I have a purl stitch, and we knit the edge stitch as a purl using the grandma method. We have finished the first row. Here we have 11 stitches. We turn the knitting. We move on to the second row. The second and all even rows will be knit stitches. So, in the second row, we will make increases at the beginning and end of the row. We slip the edge stitch as a knit. Then, starting from the second row, we will knit the knit stitches into the stitch from the row below. Here we have the next knit stitch. We knit not through the top thread but insert the needle into the stitch from the lower row. Right here, we knit the knit stitch. We have 2 stitches on the right needle. Now we need to make an increase. I make an increase from the yarn over. I lift this thread onto the left needle and need to knit a stitch from it. I look at these stitches and what should follow the pattern. Here, I have the knit stitch, the purl stitch, and this is my increase. So after the purl stitch, I need to knit a knit stitch. This means I'll knit this yarn over as a knit through the front loop to make it twisted. We have knitted. It gives us the edge stitch, knit knit. That is 2 knit stitches together. Don't worry, everything will be fixed later. Next we knit according to the pattern with purls. And we knit the knits as I said. Into the stitch from the lower row, knit, purl, usually purl. I have the classic version. And for the knit stitch, we knit it into the stitch 1 row below. I didn't finish 2 stitches. Here again, I need to make an increase, that is, after 2 stitches at the beginning of the row, and before 2 stitches at the end of the row, we lift our yarn over. We make the increase and look at this pattern. Here I have the last purl, so I need to knit my yarn over as a knit. I also knit it as a twisted knit through the front loop. Here is the pearl knit, and here I again have a knit. I knit it into the stitch 1 row below. Knit, and the last is the grandmother's pearl. So we have the edge, 2 knits, and next comes the ribbing. Here also is the edge, 2 knits, and then it alternates between knit and pearl. That's it. We've finished the second row. Here we should have 13 stitches. Let's move on to the third row. All odd rows are pearl for us. We do not make increases on the pearl rows, so we did in the second row. Now we won't. We slip the edge as a knit, and then knit according to the pattern. Here we have 2 pearls, so we knit pearls. By the way, here are these loops. This increases that loop. From the previous row, we always knit according to the pattern with regular stitches. We do not knit into the loop of the lower row. Next, I have a knit stitch. We knit the knit stitches from the row below as knit, and the pearl stitches as regular pearls. Here at the end of the row, we have 2 pearl stitches and an edge pearl. Grandma, in the third row, there are also 13 stitches. Let's move on to the fourth knit row. In this row, we will make increases in the same way. So, we slip the first edge stitch as a knit. Next, we have a knit stitch. We knit into the stitch of the lower row as knit. After 2 stitches, we need to make an increase again. That is, lift this yarn over to the left needle. Let's look at this pattern. Here, my last stitch was a knit stitch. So, after the knit stitch, I need to purl the stitch from the yarn over. Again, I purl through the front loop, and it turns out twisted. Next, we knit the knit stitch from the row below as knit and purl as usual. We knit this way to the end of the row. Here, I have a knit stitch from the row below. There are 2 stitches left. We need to make an increase again. That is, lift the yarn over to the left needle, and let's look at this pattern. Here, my last stitch was a knit. So, I need to purl the yarn over. We knit the purl, twisted through the front loop. Next, I have a knit stitch into the stitch of the lower row, and an edge purl of Grandma's. We knitted the 4th row, and here we should already have 15 stitches. We have reached the pattern of half-patterned ribbing. That is to say, we have the knit stitch alternating with the purl stitch, that's right. Let's move on to the 5th row. It is a purl row. We slip the edge stitch as if it were a knit. Next, we have a purl stitch. We knit it as a standard purl. Next, we have a knit stitch. This is our increase from the previous row. We knit it as a regular knit through the front loop. Not into the stitch of the lower row, just a regular one. That is, our increases in the next row will be knitted as regular stitches. Knit and continue following pattern, purl. After that, we knit all knits into the stitch of the lower row. Again, and here we have the 3rd stitch from the edge. This is the increase from the previous row. It should be a knit for us. Here it is a purl. It should be a knit. We knit it through the front loop as a knit, just like that. Next is a purl and the edge stitch. A purl using the grandmother's method. We have completed the 5th row. We still have 15 stitches here. Let's move on to the 6th row. We slip the edge stitch as if it were a knit. Next, we knit in a similar manner. We knit stitches as knits from the row below, purl stitches as regular purls, knits from the row below as a knit, and purls as regular purls. Here in this row, we no longer have any increases from the last row. Therefore, we simply knit according to this principle. The last is a purl using the grandmother's method. Here are 15 stitches and we continue to knit in a similar manner, just as we knitted the 6th row. So, we start by slipping the first edge stitch as if to knit, and then we alternate knitting a knit stitch into the stitch of the lower row and regular purl stitches. We knit the last edge stitch as a purl stitch using the grandmother method. In each row, we will have 15 stitches. We knit to the desired height of the ear. I have knitted a total of 43 rows or 12 centimeters in height. My last knitted row was an odd numbered and purl row. Why did I do it this way? So that the next row, when I knit the next row while joining our pieces, would be a knit row. How do I know it is a knit row? Look, this is the front side. Why? Because after the edge stitch we immediately have a braid on this side, and on the reverse side after the edge stitch, there's a purl stitch. For the hat to look nice on the outside, it must have the front side, so that on the sides right away. The knit stitches should follow the edge stitches in the form of braids. So, we do exactly this for the ears. Let's stop. After knitting the last odd and purl row, we will continue with a knit row. Similarly, we knit the second ear. Well, I have knitted 2 ears. They are laying with the front side up. We will also knit the visor, but we will cast on not 11 stitches, but 13 from the start. We will also make 2 increases in each even knit row. There will be 2 rows with increases. We will end up with 17 stitches. After this, we will knit the visor to the required height. I have knitted 36 rows in total. That is 10 centimeters in height. My last knitted row in the visor was already a knit row. Unlike the ears, it was already a knit row, so that the next row, look, the yarn is here. The next row that I will knit, while joining the pieces, should be a purl row in the visor. That is to say, the opposite of how it is in the ears. We still need to cast on the back part. Then, we will join all our pieces together. So for the back, we need to cast on 7 stitches. Also, in the usual, universal way, we also cast on loosely. 7 stitches have been cast on. We turn the knitting. We will knit the first row. Here we do not make any increases. We simply knit in the first row with a 1 by 1 ribbing. We slip the edge stitch as a knit stitch. Here we start knitting with a knit stitch and knit 1 by 1 ribbing. 1 knit, 1 purl. We start knitting the back part with a knit stitch. In those parts, we started with a purl stitch. There we have knitted. My last stitch is a knit and the edge stitch is a purl. The grandmother's way. Now we have knitted 1 row. Here we have 7 stitches. We move to the second row. Turn the knitting. We slip the edge stitch as a knit stitch. Then we knit a purl stitch. Here we have knit stitches already. We knit into the stitch from the lower row. Here is a knit. We knit into the stitch below, a knit. And the purl stitch is as usual a purl. The knit stitch below is knit, and the purl is usually a purl. We do not knit the last edge stitch as a grandmother's purl as usual. But here we will knit it as a knit stitch. Because this is our last row of the back part. And after that, we will connect all the parts. So we will knit this loop not as an edge stitch, but as a regular stitch. Here we had a purl, so we will knit the next one as a knit through the front loop, knit. There we have knitted the back of the head, and now we will connect all our pieces. I have laid out the pieces that I knitted. So, on the sides, I have ears. They are lying with the right side up. Here are the threads from the main yarn that we cut. So theoretically, we railroad. Now here is a knit row, and here is a knit row. While the visor is facing the purl side up, here is the working yarn. And theoretically, we need to knit the purl row of the visor. Now we will connect all this into a circle. By the way, all these pieces are on circular needles with a short cable for convenience right now. After we knitted the second row of the back, we knitted the last edge stitch as a knit. This is the working yarn. We do not cut it and we do not turn the work, so now we immediately start incorporating all our other pieces. We take the first ear and start incorporating it right away with the right side up. Here is our working yarn from the ear, which we cut. We do not use it, just orient ourselves. Our working yarn will be from the back. Here it is. Since the last stitch here was knit, then the first purl stitch here should be purl to keep the pattern intact. Knit means we immediately knit the edge stitch of the ear as purl. Yes, purl through the front loop, pull it tight. We connected after the purl stitch. We knit all the stitches of the ear just as we knitted the ear itself. We knit the knit stitches into the stitch one row below, while the purls we knit as regular purls. Like this for all stitches of the first ear. Here, my last knit was one row below, and we knit the edge stitch as a purl stitch. Already here we have no edge stitches as we are knitting all in the round. Therefore, after the knit, we knit a classic purl. So we knitted it. These needles from the ear are no longer needed. We set them aside. We take the visor. Here is the wrong side facing up. Here our working yarn was laid like this, and we begin to incorporate the stitches of the visor. Since we had the wrong side here, we knit the first stitch of the visor as a knit stitch through the front loop. We will fix it well later with these threads. A knit stitch, and then we simply start knitting according to the pattern, just like we did with all the stitches of the ear. We knit the knit stitches as we did before with knit stitches, and the purl stitches as usual with purl stitches. So, well, we knitted the visor. Here, the wrong side is on top. Yes, on this ear, the right side is on top. And now we start incorporating the last second ear. Here we knit the last stitch of the visor as a knit stitch. Since I have the wrong side here, we will knit the last edge stitch as a knit stitch through the front loop. We set the needles of the visor aside. They are not needed. We take the second ear and start incorporating it. Here's the working yarn from the ear, and we start to knit. Here the right side is facing up. So, since my last stitch here was a knit stitch, the first stitch of the ear will be a purl stitch. I knit through the front loop, pulling the yarn to ensure it is all snug. And then we again start knitting the knit stitches as we have them, with purl stitches for the purls, purl stitches. So we knitted it. Here I had a knit stitch, so I will make the edge stitch of the second ear a classic purl stitch. The second ear is not needed. Everything is coming together. We connected all our pieces. Here's our working yarn for the second ear. And now we just need to connect all this into a circle. This is the flower we are getting. We are almost connecting the second ear with the back of the head. But before connecting, I will mark the beginning of the round with a marker here. That is, now we will start knitting in the round. Since my last stitch here was a purl stitch, accordingly, the first stitch should be a knit stitch. This is to ensure my pattern aligns and stays neat, looking nice. This is how it turns out for me. Here, we have a knit stitch, a purl, and this last stitch should be a knit. The pattern matched up. Everything is because we highlighted an odd number for each element. Now we start knitting the first row. So, I knit the knit stitch through the front loop, pull it tight. In this row, we will knit all the purl stitches through the stitch of the lower row. That is, not knit stitches, but purl stitches already. Here's my next purl stitch. I insert the needle into the stitch of the lower row and knit it as a purl stitch. And the knit stitches we knit as regular knit stitches through the front loop. Here's a purl stitch. I insert the needle under the stitch, that is into the stitch of the lower row, right here, and knit it as a purl. We knit the regular knit through the front loop. This purl stitch we'll knit as a regular purl through the front loop, so we knit the knit stitches as regular knit stitches, and the purl stitch one row below. With purls, I hope you understood how to knit purl stitches. We knit all the stitches of the ear. At the junction of the first ear in the visor, I have a purl stitch. I can't knit it through the stitch of the lower row, so I knit it as a simple purl. Next is a knit. We move to knit the visor, and here all the stitches in the visor are purls, one row below. Here is the finished visor. The last stitch here is a knit through the front loop. The first stitch of the second ear is purl. I will also knit it as a regular purl. So here at the junctions of the elements, I can knit simply regular stitches. Because it doesn't work to knit through the stitch of the lower row here, just a regular purl. Next is a knit. This is the second ear, right? And now we knit the stitches of the lower row as purls. We finish knitting the stitches of the second ear. The last stitch before the marker is a purl for me. I knit it as a regular purl. We finished the first row. We move on to the second, which is knitted the same way as in flat knitting. That is, we will knit the knit stitches one row below, and the purl stitches as regular purls. Here is my first knit stitch. Although it should be knitted one row below, this is my initial stitch. So I will knit it simply as a regular knit stitch through the front loop. The purl is knitted as a regular purl, and the knit stitches are knitted one row below, as knits. Well, here at the joins, everything seems to be knitting normally. The knit stitches are knitting well, one row below. Therefore, we knit the entire row this way. At the end of the row, I have a purl as a regular purl. We have completed our second row, and we will continue to alternate between knitting the first and second rows. So now it is the third row, and it will be knitted just like the first. That is, we will knit into the stitch of the lower row as a purl stitch. In this way, we have joined our knitting into a circle. Now we simply knit up in the round without increases or decreases. Just straight forward for 54 stitches. In each row, we will continue until the desired height of the hat before decreases. I knitted 18 centimeters in height or 64 rows. If you are making an adult model, you will need to knit approximately 19 to 21 centimeters. It's certainly better to try it on. The last knitted row should be even. That is, we need to knit stitches into the stitch of the lower row. Now we begin to decrease. I will leave the marker for now. We will use 3 rows for the decreases. In the first row, we turn 2 stitches and knit them together as a knit through the back loop. Here's our first knit, then a purl, and we knit them together as a knit through the back loop. So we will repeat this until the end of the row. We turn the knit and purl stitches. First, we have a knit stitch, then a purl stitch, and we knit them together through the back loop. We repeat this until the end of the row. Our stitches will decrease by half. That's it, I have completed the first row. I now have 27 stitches on my needles. It was 54, now it's 27. And for the second row, I will simply knit all knit stitches. I am not removing the marker yet. I am simply knitting knit stitches through the front loop. It is already a bit hard to knit because there are too few stitches. So, I could switch to double-pointed needles, although I can still knit with circular ones. In the second row, I also have 27 stitches, just like in the first. And now we knit the last third row. Here, we will simply knit 2 stitches together through the front loop. All our stitches are now knit stitches. Therefore, I will remove the marker now and will be knitting with double-pointed needles. You can use a smaller size or just a bit smaller. I don't know a smaller size, but I basically took the same size 4, and that's it. We are knitting 2 stitches together through the front loop. This means we will have a sharp decrease. In this row, the number of stitches will also be halved. My stitches are a bit tight. I must have pulled them too tightly. So, we will knit 2 stitches together through the front loop until the end of the row. Since I had an odd number of stitches in the second row, I ended up with 1 stitch remaining. I simply knitted that last stitch as a regular knit stitch. As a result, I now have 14 stitches on my needles. I will just be gathering them together now. This means we leave not a very long tail of the yarn. Cut it, leaving a wide-eyed needle. And now transfer all the loops onto the thread. Here, pull the crown tight. Do not pull the thread too much so it does not break. And I will go around under the loops once more to secure it, and will hide it on the wrong side. Now such a sharp decrease has been achieved. In principle, the cap is already ready. It can be left untrimmed, without a hem, if you do not like it or do not want to. Then, just carefully hide all the threads, sew the visor and tie the laces. And also attach the pom-pom. If you, for example, are knitting a cap for a small child, you can also make some kind of lining and sew it, and that's it. The cap will be ready. To learn how to do the hem and tie the laces, look at the separate lessons. Links will be under